like to ask you, what was the contribution of your mentors and your coaches in your life journey and this professional journey? Because most of the times people think that I don't need a coach, I don't need a mentor, but I know personally for a fact that I needed mentorship and a guidance and a coaching throughout my career. And I have been a passionate student, and I'm a lifelong student. I continue to learn even now. I'll be 60 next year, but I still continue to learn from my different parts, wherever I can gather this knowledge and experiences of the others. So what according to you was a contribution from your coaches and your mentors?
I had tremendous amount. Their contribution was tremendous in my career. There was a point of time in my career where pre-Beijing, for example, I had 9 people in my support staff, and I was never shy of asking for help when I needed it. It was about finding the right team. It was about finding the people who would be with me in good times and in bad, who would not judge me for just my outcomes, but who would love me for the person that I was. So that was the bond that I was able to build with these individuals. And I have to say, there were varied personalities that I worked with at a certain period of time. There was a period of time where I worked with a set of coaches who I loved, and simultaneously I worked with a coach who I never got along with. But I decided that I continued to work with him because the man was very tough on me. He was my biggest critic. He kept telling me things that I did not want to hear. And although those things always sounded harsh and always created resistance in me, because
so
they always took me.
Bitter pills which are required by any patient. Is that the way you took it?
No, I did not take it as a, well, it was not about just criticism. It was constructive criticism, but it was also about having an open mindset. And it was about having a mindset where you would be open to hear another perspective, because he was providing another perspective to a certain situation. And sometimes when another perspective takes you out of your own comfort zone is presented to you initially, it just creates a great amount of resistance in you. But when you think about it for a couple of days and you cool down a little bit, it suddenly starts to make a lot of sense.
Absolutely. We as Indians, unfortunately, are not used to taking criticism positively. And as you rightly put it, it was a constructive criticism only for the benefit of your performance and your enhancement only.
Absolutely correct. And, it was a relationship which always challenged me. It was a relationship which always teased me. But when I look back, I have to say it was one of my most valuable relationships, because it brought the best out of me. It took me to the edge. It pushed me to the edge. And it really brought that 1% over the others, what one is looking at. When you are in a competition such as an Olympic Games, the competition is going to be immense, and you're going to be. It is that 1% which distinguishes between winning and not and coming 10th or 15th, and it is about getting those small details right. No detail is small enough to ignore, and that I think was a very valuable lesson that I learned through my relationships with my coaches. But I think it was I built a team around me who I knew had their best intentions in mind. They wanted the best for me. And once I was convinced on them, I took their criticism and I took their points very sportingly. I was very open-minded, very to advice, very open-minded to other perspectives. Maybe I did not follow each one of them, but each one of those different perspectives. But I always gave them a patient try. I always
due consideration basically before rejecting.
Yes.
What according to you are 3 major milestones in your personal life or your professional life? 3 major milestones, if you can think of.
Well, I think milestones are they can be defined as outcomes, but I think I can easily list out that I won a gold medal at the Olympic Games. It was a great milestone for me.
That is a great milestone from the country's point of view, Abhinav.
Yes, but I think
yes,
I think those are important milestones, and they were very important milestones to me as well. But I think it was just my journey you have to understand my journey a little bit to really understand what my biggest milestone was. I was an athlete who was always assailed by a lot of self-doubt. I never had the natural flair of an athlete, as I spoke the first answer itself. I was not a naturally gifted athlete. I was not a confident person. I was always assailed by a lot of anxiety and self-doubt. Um, and I always had to encounter in a sporting competition, you need a certain amount of belief and confidence that, which is often talked about. But I always struggled with it. So I started to not look at the self-belief theory anymore. And what I started to really go after instead of self-belief and self-confidence was my journey began to achieve self-respect. And that self-respect was only achieved when I knew that I had given it my absolute all. I did everything humanly possible to prepare for the Olympic Games with all honesty, being brutally honest to yourself. When I had to look myself in the mirror every day and ask myself the question, have I given it my best today to prepare? And if the answer was yes, I had a good night's sleep. And through this journey is what I achieved my own self-respect. And when I achieved my self-respect, it was one of the most powerful feelings that I ever gained in my life. That sense of security that I had going into an Olympic Games, knowing that I have done my absolute best and that I was a winner in my own eyes, even before I shot the first shot at the Olympic Games. That to me was my biggest milestone of my career and of my life so far.
So I think you've often said that you have given more importance to self-respect than self-confidence. You've often said that. So is that the reason what you've just mentioned?
Yes, because I really struggled with self-belief. I just did not have it. And I know that many people struggle with it, but just don't sometimes have the courage to acknowledge it. But it is okay not to be okay sometimes. But when you do have that self-respect from you, it is very powerful. And I believe that when you do gain your own self-respect, that is true confidence. It's maybe not very vocal in nature, but it's inner have as a person, which comes from deep within your being. And that I think is something in difficult moments in life, which everybody will face. That is what you bring out your resilience from. That is where you actually draw your strength from when you will be stuck in a crisis. And believe me that you will be stuck in a crisis at some point or the other.
Absolutely. No, but amazing. This is absolutely a different perspective from what generally people believe, that self-confidence is more important than self-respect. But the self-respect in your own eyes is what brings the self-confidence, is what I would like to take away as a takeaway from this. In 2004 Summer Olympics, you established a new world record during qualifying round. But then finally you ended up 8th in the finals in that year. So how disappointing was that? How frustrating was that? Did you think of giving up, or did that egg you on to do better in the next Olympics and so on and so forth? So what were your thoughts around at that time?
Yeah. Yes, and this was probably one of a big moment in my life because it was my biggest failure in my life. At the grandest arena in sport, I make an Olympic final, breaking an Olympic record, pretty much primed to win a medal that day. And to win a medal that particular day, I had to shoot 10 very ordinary shots, really. But I just happened to shoot the 10 worst shots of my life in that Olympic final. Of course, it was heartbreaking. It was very, very disappointing. A few days after that Olympic final, it came to light that the floor that I was standing on had a loose tile underfoot, which reverberated every time I picked up my rifle. So it was so heartbreaking.
Something absolutely beyond your control.
It was something totally beyond my control. And it was something which, of course, there was a huge amount of disappointment. I felt bitter. I felt saddened, and all of that, those emotions which normally come with failure and disappointment. But, this failure taught me one of the greatest lessons of my life. And the greatest lesson that it taught me was learning to detach yourself from outcomes and really be focused on the process. And that is how my life changed. That is how my attitude towards my next Olympic journey changed and started, that I was totally detached from the outcome. Of course, I wanted a gold medal. It was already in my mind, but I did not need to remind myself and focus
So
on
what
that.
I'm hearing you
But,
say is that basically, the same karma theory or the Bhagavad Gita, अपने कर्म करते रहो, outcome जो होएगा, at least be true to what you are trying to do.
You have to. I was totally committed to the process. I think it was being very, very process oriented, and of course, leaving nothing to chance. You had to, I started becoming obsessive about every little detail. The first thing that I went when I started training again after the Athens Olympics was to install a loose tile in my home range in Chandigarh.
Wow.
So that I could, even if it happens again, I'm prepared for a certain thing.
Amazing.
I went into many, many details and many, many small things that I did, which to the onlooker may not make any sense, but it was every little detail counts. I'll give you a few examples because they are. I would like to explain this a little bit. For example, I went to South Africa and I got my brain mapped, and I trained and for about 2,000 shots, and then they could see what sort of a brain activity I had when I was shooting really well, and then I could actually, with the use of technology, train myself to be in that state of mind when I was shooting. Because I had this whole flaw incident in Athens, I sold my shoes, my specific shooting shoes, with rubber, which is used on the soles, on the tires, Ferrari tires, because they had the most anti-skid element to it. I went into every single detail to get my mind, my body, my technique, and my equipment prime. At that time, if you remember, before Beijing, the best ammunition that was made was by the Chinese, but the Chinese never sold it to anybody else. So I managed to almost smuggle some in. So I had to become almost a smuggler of sorts, but I managed to get them through a colleague in Hong Kong. But it was about trying to do every little thing, even if
so
it would help me by
what did your brain mapping
0.0001.
of 2,000 shots? What was the outcome, if you can share that brain mapping which you did? Which were the best shots at that time? What was the mental mind frame of yours?
You have to learn how to silence it, and you have to learn how to silence your your inner self-talk while you're actually performing. Because when you're actually performing, you have to perform instinctively. You have to go by your gut to a great degree in moments of this thing, and you have to be trained well enough. You cannot, and you have to stop that chatter that sometimes is very, very disturbing when you're trying to focus on something.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.